Check. 1, 2, 3.
The D. Brief. This is the D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's arts
and entertainment scene.
This is the D
Brief.
Hello and welcome to the Debrief podcast for Thursday, March 26th, 2020.
It is.
I'm Seth Ressler.
I'm Becky Scarcella.
And look, guys, this is a podcast about the Detroit arts and entertainment scene. You know, I had a lot of concerns, a lot of reservations, a lot of things that I worried about when we started this podcast. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I never worried about was that we would wake up one morning and there wouldn't be a Detroit arts and entertainment scene.
Well, there still is a scene, but it looks very, very different.
Yeah, it's just completely ground to a halt.
Yes.
Because of this pandemic.
Yes. So it's, to say we're sad and concerned is an understatement.
Yeah. And look, we're going to be honest with you. This is going to be our last show for a while. We're putting this thing on hold because, frankly, this is a show that's been all about what's been going on in Metro Detroit and recommending things that people can go see, talking about the artists and entertainers. We've done, I think, like 230 episodes. I think we've had 300 or 400 guests on this show.
Yeah, we got the whole list on our website.
It's been a huge, enormous list.
You know, we tell you to go to concerts. We tell you to go to food pop-ups. We tell you to go to comedy festivals, etc.
And none of that's happening now.
Yeah. So we're going to take a break. We know that there's a lot of good sources out there. We're going to keep on social media, keep sharing.
But you know what part of it is, as much as I admire the efforts, I don't want to come on here and do a podcast about, hey, Griffin Claus making hand sanitizer.
Right. There's only so much. Yeah. I think
that you can do.
Yeah. We figure our efforts are going to be spent in better ways. We've got some plans for a website.
We are working on a website that we think here's what's so frightening about what we're going through right now is that we're still looking at it coming.
Exactly.
We are not in the aftermath. We are in the before.
We're not even in the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
And you look at what's coming and you sit there and you say to yourself, what do people need? They need cash or they need breathing masks and ventilators.
Right.
I am not in a position to give anybody cash or breathing masks or ventilators.
Any of those things, yeah.
Right? There's nothing we can do. And so the conclusion that I think that we have both come to is that our role is once we get through all of that, let's go support the first responders and the healthcare workers.
Yeah,
and the
do
people,
some volunteer work, etc.
Stocking the grocery store shelves and things like that. And then once we get back to the point where we're trying to get back to normal, especially when it comes to culture and arts and entertainment, then there may be a role for us.
Right. And when everything reemerges that we can help it accelerate.
Yeah.
So
and look, I feel like so many people feel like they're in this situation where they're sitting there going, I have some superpowers, but they're useless in this particular situation.
Right.
The fact
That's
that I'm
a
personal trainer is not useful, now, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. And that being said, please keep up online with, fitness classes. People are doing free fitness classes online. Lots of musicians are doing live streams. They're wonderful. Keep doing that. If there are ways you can support your small businesses, your artists, your entertainers, your, tip your bartenders, those types of, we're not discounting any of that.
No, we're not discounting any of that. I will say that I think everybody out there has some sort of superpower, some sort of thing that they are good at. And I think that, not every superpower is useful in every situation. Exactly. Right. Yeah. There's some situation where just having X-ray vision just doesn't do anything for you or, whatever it might be. If you are looking at what's going on in the world right now and your superpower is not useful at this moment, don't interpret that as meaning that your superpower is never going to be
valuable.
Useful.
Yeah.
Right. There's going to be eventually a time and a place again where it is useful. Recognize that, be okay. And I'm terrible at this. I sometimes the right thing to do is nothing. Yeah. And I am awful in those situations because I always need to do everything. And everybody's like, oh, all you got to do is sit at home now. And I'm terrible. It freaks me out. I don't know how to do that. But that's what we got to do now. Right. There will come a time. And so we are putting the podcast on pause because we recognize that we've got this, but now is not the time for it. Exactly. And there may be some other ways and some other things that we can do down the road
to help match up artists and entertainers with gigs, with opportunities. So we'll work on building that.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that's going to be coming soon. This is something that we've been working on for a while. We've been excited about, and we think it could play a role. So we will keep you informed of that. Until then, on the show today, we have Bailey Sisoy Isgoro. She's one of our regular call-in guests.
Well, wait. Her name.
Oh, that's right. She's not Bailey Sisoy Isgoro. She's been with us so long that when she started, her name was Bailey Sisoy Isgoro.
Now it's Bailey Sisoy Moore.
Yes. So
happily married.
She has been one of the fantastic guests that we've had over the years, one of our regular call-ins who called in every so often. And so let's see what she's got to say.
Yes.
All right, Becky, this week, since we have not been allowed to have anybody come into the studio with us,
right,
we've had nothing but our favorite call-in guests every week. We had Gary Graff yesterday. Today we have joining us a woman who's been calling in for, years now at this point.
Right, the 2 years.
Yeah. In fact, when we started, her name was Bailey Sisoy Isgoro.
Yeah.
But it's not anymore. No. It's Bailey Sisoy Moore because she got married. She runs Detroit History Tours and the Detroit History Club. Bailey, it's great to have you back on the show.
Welcome.
Thanks. I feel like we're old friends.
We are. Yes. Yeah. We've been to each other's events and what a strange time right now though.
Yeah, I mean, you two are both in the tour business, and like everything else, it's just not a good time for that. Yeah,
right before we hopped on here, Bailey, you and I were talking about just starting every day with refunding customers because we can't do tours.
Yeah, it's really an unprecedented time in so many fields. I think outside of medical, outside of industry, there are very, very, very few fields that aren't being crippled by this.
Right.
And like we were saying before we went on air, part of us wants to say, hey, that's small potatoes. That's minimal complaints. Our lives are okay. We'll get through this. But it's going to be interesting to see what is able to come back when this, kind of ends and on the other side of this. And tourism's in a huge, huge, huge flux because what we're spending all day, every day doing is refunding.
Right.
And for us, we see about 40,000 people a year, and that's not evenly dispersed throughout the year. Some of our biggest months are spring and fall.
Exactly.
Summer people are gone,
out.
winter people are down.
Yeah, we're just coming out of bad season.
So we're just coming into our biggest season, and we've been told from the governor that we're shut down through April 16th, no matter what. And even if everything goes right, and knock on wood and pray that it does, that doesn't mean April 17th, we've got full bookings again.
No.
So we're already looking at what does this mean for our July calendar? What does this mean for our August calendar? And there's going to be tour companies that don't come back from this. The refunds are going to absolutely hit them hard. And so I guess I just say what the National Tourism Board is saying, reschedule or postpone, don't cancel, letting those small tour operators hold on to that money and reschedule you into the future is going to be the difference between some of these companies surviving and some having to file bankruptcy and not be able to reopen on the other side of this.
Well, and the sad part is just the ripple effect because, I know the tours we give, it's not just about benefiting us. Or
absolutely not.
We're the leader of a whole range of businesses like that we take people to. So we are, feel this personal responsibility as well for the livelihood of the restaurants and bars and venues that we take people to that give them increased awareness in business. So it just hurts on so many levels.
And these are our friends. I mean, We're making it sound very clinical and clean, but these are our friends. In a lot of cases for me, these are the people I grew up with. And I was on the phone this afternoon with a bar owner who we take about 40,000 people a year to his bar. And he said, if you even think about $5 a person across 40,000 people in a year, just that not happening is this huge economic hit. Right. And then you think about multiple tour industries and multiple guides bringing it just spirals out, and it's going to happen with bars and restaurants. Our service sisters and brothers in the bar industry, who I feel like right now we're all missing on so many levels, they're struggling. They're struggling like crazy to hold on, and it's hard. No way to cut it other than it's hard.
Bailey, as I've watched the news, the analogies have changed, and they started changing rapidly. I think when people first started talking about this, they were talking about, oh, this might be as bad as the recession of 2008, or, really, I think they were looking at the stock market, even before they were looking at what was going on with the pandemic.
Which,
and the health effects.
Why are we not closing the markets?
Right?
I don't.
But
please.
The analogies changed. It was 2008, and then it was 1987, and then all of a sudden, like overnight, the analogies became it's World War II, it's the Great Depression. You study history. What do you think the right analogy is here
at this point?
What should we be looking at?
So this is what I've been struggling with since you asked me to come on, sort of this idea of everybody wants this clean parallel, this apples to oranges, because everyone I think is looking for what the end of this is. So we want some story that we can look at to see how that ended, to kind of give us hope for how this is going to end. And it's not apples to oranges. It's apples to dragons, because in World War II, America had over 400 major industries. Today, America has over 11,000 major industries. So to say like automotive is going to rebound, it's a totally different ballgame 75 years out from World War II, when automotive employed 1/8 of the country in 1940. Today, it employs less than 1/140th. So it's these really weird numbers to try to marginalized into these clean groups. There's been a lot of talk about 1918 and 1920 because the Spanish flu was really the last time America saw mass quarantine. And people like the comparison because it gives you this really clear kind of black and white illustration of what social distancing can do. Long story short, Philadelphia and St. Louis handled the outbreak of Spanish flu, the 1918 influenza, completely differently. St. Louis locks the city down. They cancel church events, synagogue events. They cancel school. And in 5 weeks, really, St. Louis has some outbreak, and they definitely have some deaths, but it's nothing compared to Philadelphia, which goes full bore, lets everything happen as it normally would, even hosts a war bond parade. Within 48 hours of the war bond parade, they had mass infection rates. And Philadelphia would go on to have 14,586 deaths to St. Louis's less than 240. So there's been these kind of parallels that keep being drawn. What I find to be so interesting about this, though, is they were asked to social distance and isolate at a time when there wasn't Facebook or Skype or video games or Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Disney Plus. What we're being asked to do is very similar to 1918, except we have the privilege of Grubhub and Netflix. We're being asked to shelter in place, to stay home, to help the spread of the virus, minimize and to flatten the curve. But we're being asked to do it at such a different time than 1918. It almost feels kind of gauche to make the comparison.
Yeah, I agree with that. It just, I'm sure you've seen this too about, I'm a Gen Xer, and there's been all this stuff going around Gen X, like, we got this. Like, we used to subsist on SpaghettiOs.
We're latchkey kids, that kind of stuff.
Whatever. But it is true. Like how, not to minimize any of because we're all worried, we're all concerned, but we're not asking you to go on the front lines of the war. It's like,
well, wait a minute. Amazon Prime is now saying that some of my packages might take 3 or 4 days.
Well, so that is
the horror.
But really. Yeah, there's
you're right.
And there's connectivity like never before, where you can still, like I've been saying, I'm so worried about people's mental health, but at least we can talk to our families and see their faces and things like that.
The average time for a letter from a man serving in the Pacific during World War II to reach Michigan was 3.5 weeks.
Right.
Wow.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
When today you can jump on Skype, you can call. I mean, Lord, I'm the millennial generation where everything is text messaging, but call your mom, call your grandma, check in on people, call that old friend you've been thinking about. And I think if there was ever a time to just call and say, hey, I'm sorry I haven't talked to you in years, but I've got half an hour. Can we catch up?
Yeah.
We are in that moment.
You know, one of the things that they are talking about a lot now is treating this like a war, and especially in the sense of mobilizing industry and enlisting them to help defeat this virus. I think they're talking about making ventilators, making masks, things like that. And of course, we always heard growing up about how the car companies did that in World War II, you know, that Ford was making tanks or whatever. How appropriate is that analogy, do you think? And can you tell us a little bit more about what happened back then?
I think it's a brilliant analogy. I think in so many moments in world history and American history, Detroit has rode to the rescue. And when this all started and the discussion about the car companies closing was going out there, the tweet I sent out was, Arsenal of Democracy rides again.
Right.
We are the most mechanized city in the country. We know how to build stuff. Now, there is this illusion that we're going to like flip a switch, right? It's going to be a light switch. And tomorrow, instead of making cars, General Motors is making ventilators. And I am not willing to continue that rhetoric and to simplify it to that. It is not going to be quick or easy or fast or cheap for automobile manufacturers to switch to making medicine. It's just not.
Right.
When we talk about Ford during the Arsenal of Democracy, they become famous for the Liberator bomber, the B-17s and the B-24s. Production of these bombers is brought by Ford from the West Coast to Detroit. Near the end of the war, we're making a Liberator bomber every 58 minutes. But it took us 4.5 years to get to the point where we could produce at that speed and that quality. So this idea that tomorrow Ford's going to make ventilators is absurd. It can't happen that quickly. But if you put enough money and enough time and enough Detroit minds behind something, 6 months from now, could we be rolling ventilators off of our assembly lines? Absolutely. And to my mind, that's what we should be working towards, because it's proven time and time again throughout history that people are smart. People recognize a war. And what they want in a war is an enemy and then something they can do to fight that enemy. Mm-hmm. So if we in Detroit can say, look, we're not all medical professionals. God bless the medical professionals. But what we have here are engineers, we have designers, we have inventors, we have thinkers, and then we've got laborers, one of the most skilled labor forces in the world. Put us to work. I think it would go a long way to mental health in this country. I also think this is a war that's going to be won in very, very small factories. Watching General Motors, Ford, Chrysler trying to retool, you have to think about it like boats at sea. It takes a lot longer to turn around a warship than it does to turn around a cigarette boat. So what I think is going to be interesting is some of these small companies, groups with 2 or 3 3D printers at their disposal, groups who can do rapid prototyping, cut and sew machining shops that can get masks going, places with 15 to 20 employees that can suddenly turn on a dime that much tighter radius and start producing, might get us through until we can get our warships in place, like General Motors and Ford building at huge scale, because we're going to need it all.
Right.
I have a question. I was listening to the president speak the other night, and there was a line that caught my attention. Maybe it wasn't the president, maybe it was Pence, but somebody who said, Honeywell called us and said, we can do such and such. And the thought that went through my head was, what do you mean Honeywell called you? Why didn't you call Honeywell?
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you know how that worked in the past. Was it the companies that volunteered and essentially said, hey, guys, you know, we can do this? Or was it the government going to them and saying, look, you're doing this now. This is the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
You know, it's a little bit of both. So here in Detroit, we have a guy named Knutson. And Knutson was not a born American. He became an American citizen. And he was a Dane. He worked for the automobile companies for his entire career, 30 years. And he leaves his $400,000 a year job in 1940 to go to work. This is still Lend-Lease. We have not yet had Pearl Harbor. America is not officially in the war. He leaves a $400,000 a year job to go work for Francis Perkins, the Secretary of Labor, under FDR, as the first $1 man. He takes a $1 a year salary, and his entire purpose is to go around and convince other companies to start building for the war effort. He enlists guys like Henry Leland, my favorite person in Detroit history. Etzel Ford jumps on board. He really rallies these guys with this call of, look, There's one city in the country that can do this. And if it's going to be us, we got to rise up. So you start getting guys like Etzel Ford and Charlie Sworenson, Ford's right-hand man, going to the federal government and saying, look, we think we can build the planes faster, more efficiently, at a better quality than Boeing is. Send us out there. Let us go. And never forget that the federal government didn't fund Ford's building of the Willow Run facility. The first year and a half, that facility was funded by the Ford family, who said, nope, for the war effort, we're doing this. We're going to retool. And I don't know how that would work today with Ford, GM, and Chrysler having shareholders, having stock prices, how we would be able to rally to say, look, we're going to put the money up and hope to get the money back, which Ford eventually did. But it was very much a meeting in the middle. And I think what's so interesting in this, and unfortunately, though, the president has been giving out a lot of misinformation, and as has his vice president and his cabinet, what's been interesting is it's really come down to a lot of the governors. We see Governor Whitmer here in Michigan really making those calls, reaching out to not only the universities who are doing a lot, but to the main industries saying, what do we got? How can we work? What can we supply you with? And we're seeing that in Ohio. We're seeing it in New York with Governor Cuomo, this idea that we're going to have to do this on a state-to-state level, but we're also going to have to support each other. And I think if we're following the trajectory, we're about 3.5 weeks behind Europe. Many American states are the size of many European countries. And what we're seeing is European countries giving supplies, trading doctors, trying to support and help each other. And I think that's going to be what happens here at a government level, with our governors really having to rally and try to help state to state in lieu of what seems to be a very unorganized federal response, which is completely different from World War II and World War I.
Those efforts seem like perfectly quaint now. And I just can't imagine. Like, my sister lives in the Bay Area, California, and it was a week ago, over a week ago now, where they went in shelter in place, and she was one of the first counties in the state to do so. And she's like, I wish everyone would learn from this, and follow suit. And it's really the strong governor leadership that's making it happen.
Well, and watching Cuomo speak was pretty amazing, because you just went,
riveting.
That's
leadership.
But this is a time, historically, it is crises like these where you see real leaders emerge, I think,
Absolutely.
in a lot of ways.
And real ideas and the separating of what's good for all versus other interests.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a great parallel to World War II. Today we look back on it all and we think everybody jumped on board right away. Rosie the Riveter and Uncle Sam and G.I. Joe, and we all just kind of went for it. But early days of World War II, you did have people saying, why should I give up my meat? You had people fighting rationing. You had people disobeying the gasoline rations and going on trips. I think it's a moment where what's being asked of us, what's being asked of medical professionals is Herculean. But what's being asked of tour guides, what's being asked of the average American right now is basic kindness.
Right.
You need to stay home. You need to stay home to protect the weakest among us. And if you can put something good out into the world, do it. If you've got extra food, share it. Don't hoard. Make sure everyone's got enough. It's not that much, and it would be a shame if, 75 years from now, there's another pandemic or a global war or something that spurs podcasters to start talking about the lessons learned in 2020, and it's not a positive story.
Right.
I think it's kind of our moment, and I'm a millennial. You said earlier you're a Gen Xer. We've been incredibly lucky. We've lived lives in relative peace.
Exactly.
For our whole lives. And if this is the big moment we're being called on, stay on your couch and watch Netflix.
Right. And check in on your neighbor. Check in on your older neighbor. Do they need a meal? That kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Think about the people in your lives who are nurses, police officers, firefighters. If you're cooking, cook a little extra. You can socially distance by leaving that meal on their front porch. As long as they microwave it for at least 30 seconds, even if you've transmitted something onto the food and cooking it, the 30-second microwaving will kill it. And I mean, what's being asked of us is kindness. All the lessons we learned in kindergarten, and I think we're going to rise to it.
I think
they rose to it, multiple times through American history, and we just got to do it again.
So here's my big takeaway from the woman who spends all her time reading the history books. If you want to get into those history books, all you got to do is Netflix and chill. Is that what you're saying?
It's literally the easiest way to get into the history books ever, and I fully support it. Netflix and chill.
Yes.
And then we'll see the baby boom in 9 months.
That's exactly right. Yeah. But yeah, just a little more sense of the greater good and a little less selfishness.
All right, Bailey, before you get out of here, I know that you are doing something now that you're, quarantined like the rest of us or locked in place. Let's talk about history bedtime stories.
So, I feel useless right now. I've spent my whole life reading history books. I don't have any tangible skills that are useful to anyone in this current epidemic. And I think a lot of us are feeling that way. And I mentioned that to my husband, who mentioned it to somebody. And next thing you know, I got a phone call from a friend who said, my kids are at home and we don't have school. And is there any way you could do little history stories just to try to entertain them? So we started thinking about it. I said, you know what? We'll do history bedtime stories. So tonight is night number 12. It's 12 days since I've left my house. So every day I'm telling one history story, something about Detroit history, American history, world history that the kids are missing out on their curriculum right now. I was smuggled a 4th grade history book by a very kind teacher. So we're working our way partly through that curriculum and then also partly to things we think are interesting. As an example, we do boat tours. You guys have been on our tall ship tour.
I have,
in the summer.
Yeah.
And we are actually bringing in some of our other guides to do the bedtime stories. So most nights it's me at 8 p.m., but every now and then it's one of our other guides. And we're going to talk to our tall ship tour guides, because they are literally quarantined on a schooner in Bay City right now. They can't leave the ship because there's some concern they've been exposed. So they're currently flying the Yellow Jack or Quebec flag, which is the letter Q in the flag alphabet, but it's just a big yellow flag. And what it means is quarantined. Do not come on board. Do not go to shore.
Oh, wow.
And that flag has been used all the way back to World War I as a way of symbolizing there is disease on this ship. We will not come into port. It's also used as a way in international borders to say there is disease here. Do not land at this port. The Port Authority of Detroit is currently not flying a quarantine flag, but after Monday morning's announcement, there's a good chance we might see that flag go up. And in my research, the last time that flag flew in Detroit was 1920. So, I mean, we really are living through a historic moment, and it's fun to capture that in these little bedtime stories. They're live on our Facebook every night at 8. You're also able to go back and rewatch them in the morning if your kids have an earlier bedtime. And then at the end, we're doing little contests because all of the small businesses are hurting. So we are lucky enough that we had a tiny little bit of money in our stores, and we bought gift cards to some of those bars, restaurants, places we care about that we know are hurting. And at the end of each bedtime story, we give everybody a homework assignment that might be take a picture doing a certain thing or post a video or answer some questions. And then we select winners for those gift cards so that when we get through this, we all have something fun to look forward to.
That's awesome. I do love this aspect of things that people are getting so creative online, and it's so great to see your face and hear your stories, and this is really a cool upside. And I think we're all getting these great ideas out there. And that's what we have right now. We have our own minds and our own innovations. That's the good things that will come out of this.
You're absolutely right. And I think it's from a history perspective, I'd be a bit of an ass if I didn't mention that most plagues historically get referred to as dark ages. And after a dark age, you get a renaissance. So yep. The hope really is, and I mean, historians and all of the historian blogs and all of the websites where historians kind of gather to nerd out lately have had the slogan, wait for the Renaissance. We're going to get through this. And I think how hard it is based on how much everybody pitches in.
Correct. Yeah. And in some respects, we have more resources than we've ever had in any other time in history. So No excuse.
Well put.
Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't have Netflix.
Right.
All right, Bailey. Well, look, I want to thank you personally for coming on this show and showing us so much support over the years.
Yes.
This podcast is now going to become history, at least for the foreseeable future, because it's a podcast about the Detroit arts and entertainment scene and everything that's going on in it, and nothing's going on in it at the moment. So we are going to go on hiatus. It may be indefinite. We don't really know at this point. But one of the things that has made this show so great to do is having people like you on it that we've met and that we've gotten to know over the years and who have been willing to come on and share their expertise with us. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate that. So thank you.
Yes. Thanks for being part of our community.
Thank you guys. And we're coming back from this. And when we do, have me on to talk about Renaissance periods, because we're going to get through this.
That's our hope.
But thank you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you guys for being such a big part of supporting all of the people and all of the events that are going to need all of our support on the other side of this. And you guys are just such a big part of Detroit and such a big part of our lives. So thank you.
It's so upbeat.
But you know what? I still feel like dancing.
You do?
I do. I feel
like hiding under the covers for a week.
Well, also that too. Okay, ask me in a minute. It's literally changes by the minute.
Well, that's what's weird about what's going on right now. It's this wild switch between panic and boredom.
Yes, and sadness and hope. And
yes.
Oh goodness, I'm a mess.
Yeah, I am too. It's all right. And look, obviously this is going to be our last show for the foreseeable future.
Right.
We don't really know what's going to happen, but it doesn't make sense to keep coming in here and recording episodes when there's nothing going on, nothing that people can go to, at least
and
at the moment.
And I will say there's some great sources out there. For instance, Detour Detroit, who's doing really nice weekly newsletter about how to engage with arts and entertainment and other general city stuff as well, bigger scope than we have, but there's stuff out there. So keep trying to engage. There's a lot of stuff online that you can be a part of.
Yeah. Now we do have something in the works. We are working on a website that we think is going to help as this passes and we start transitioning back to normal. So you'll start hearing from us on social media, and you can follow us on social media if you want to know more about that, or go to our website, thedebriefdetroit.com, and sign up for our email list, things like that.
We'll be pushing out info and trying to make a platform that when this is over, we can re-engage and really help artists and entertainers match up with opportunities and gigs and things like that. So.
But the podcast for the moment is on hiatus.
Right.
You know what I'm going to miss most is...
Me?
You know what I'm going to miss second most?
Okay.
is all the fantastic guests that we've had on the show.
Absolutely. I know.
Because we really have. And that's always, I think, been the thing that I have been most proud of.
Absolutely.
As we've done this show, is that the caliber of guests that we have had on, and the people who have been willing to
take their time
and be part of the show. You know, we had Carmen Harlan on the show, and she was fantastic. And we had Mark Ridley on the podcast, and we just had, so many wonderful, Tony Rocco, the artist, and just amazing people.
Really great people. And so many that we've been able to continue relationships with in different ways. And it's been a tremendous community and quite a privilege to have access to so much great knowledge, so much great creativity. So I'll miss that a lot.
And the rough thing is that they're all having a hard time right now. They're all suffering, whether they're actors, whether they're comedians, whether they're musicians, chefs. It doesn't matter.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The chefs, the restaurants. It's a lot.
We're all in this together. Let's hang in together. Just because we're not in your ear every week, that doesn't mean that we aren't thinking about you. We don't care about you. We don't support what you do. We absolutely do. More than ever. Becky, we've been closing out our episodes with a song from a local musician. You got a final one here for us?
Yeah, and I just think it was serendipity or something, that some of the song submissions I got this time that just absolutely fit this theme. I hate that this is the theme, but this song is called Finish Line, okay? And it's about making it through a hard time in life. So very appropriate for now. Finish Line is by a singer named Angela Davis from Detroit. She has shared the stage with people like the Temptations, the Beach Boys, Johnny Gill, the huge resume of people she's played with and done collabs with. She was recently part of the All-Star tribute to Aretha Franklin at the former Shane Park. And so this is just an inspirational song. Listen to the lyrics, her lovely voice, and I hope you enjoy it. Finish Line.
Look, it's not true at the moment, but we've ended every episode by saying it, so we will say it again for one last time, at least for the moment, in the hopes that we get back there.
Yes.
Detroit's moving.
Keep up.
To bear. Lost sight of who I was back then. Wasn't living the life that I'd always dreamed. No. Though I was rock bottom low, I learned things that I never know. Struggled through it all, made it through the finish line. Yeah. Struggled through it all, made it through the finish line. Struggled through it all, made it to the finish line. I made it. Struggled through it all, made it to the finish line. Some days felt like they'd never end. They never end, no. Lost track of where my life was going. Through all my ups and downs, I turned my life around, yeah. Struggled through it all, made it through the finish line. Yeah. Struggled through it all, made it through the finish line. I made it. Struggled through it all, made it to the finish line. Yeah. Struggled through it all, made it to the finish line. I made it. If it wasn't for all the heartache and the pain, wouldn't be who I am today. No. Now I can truly say, yeah, I made it in every way. Oh, yeah. Struggled through it all, made it through the finish line. Oh, yeah. Struggled through it all, made it through the finish line. I made it. Struggled through it all, made it to the finish line. I made it. Struggled through it all, made it to the finish line. Oh yeah. Struggles and all, I made it to the finish line. Struggles and all, I made it to the finish line.
The D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.